For the past few years, I've been living with this growing sense of urgency, this feeling that I'm running out of time to find and fulfill my life purpose. Now, maybe it's because my 30s are only a couple of years away. Maybe it's because I spent so much of my early 20s daydreaming instead of actually pursuing my dreams that now I feel like I have to make up for lost time. Maybe it's the fact that the world is moving at an increasingly rapid pace. Or maybe I just think about my mortality way too much. In either case, I've been living with this growing feeling that time is evading me. As my 20s have progressed, my urgent desire to meet and fulfill my full potential has grown into a very subtle but very strong source of stress in my life. The fear that I've carried around potentially wasting my potential, wasting my life on earth, has repeatedly led me to overextend myself, take on too much, push my boundaries too far, too soon. And all of this has led to a series of burnouts that have become so intolerable to me, I've been forced to reevaluate where I get my sense of purpose from. Simply put, I am exhausted trying to live up to my own expectations. So these past few months, I decided to let them go, and in this video, I want to share with you how doing so has completely changed my perspective on what having a life purpose actually means. So the first question that got me completely reevaluating where I get my sense of purpose from is the following. Does my life purpose inherently have to be grandiose? How many of us, when we contemplate our life purpose, tell ourselves that our legacy, our life's work, the reason we were miraculously granted a precious human life on earth in the world of form, all of this is happening so that we can accomplish nothing special? Well, not me. In fact, the reason I keep burning out in my endless quest to meet my life purpose is because of this belief that I've long held that my life purpose, anyone's life purpose, must inherently be something grandiose, and that unless I'm able to do something remarkably unique out of my life, I will have failed my life purpose. It seems obvious saying this out loud why this kind of belief system would lead to endless rounds of burnout and profound sadness, because these are impossible standards to live with, not to mention the fact that they are incredibly elusive. I mean, at what point can I consider myself to have achieved something remarkable? What does that even mean? What does that even look like in today's online world where millions of people are sharing their remarkable talents online every second of every day, and everything that gets shared that is remarkable gets gobbled up by the social media algorithms within 48 hours, and if not entirely forgotten, is considered old news within a week? What I've realized over the years, and particularly over these past few months when contemplating this topic of life purpose, is that the more I believe that my sense of purpose can only be fulfilled by achieving something remarkable and exceptional, the more aimless I actually end up feeling, because when you approach life with an overachiever's mentality like this, no achievement ever feels like it's good enough, and finding your life purpose becomes this rat race that never ends. So the more I've questioned this idea that my sense of purpose must inherently be something grandiose, a second realization started to emerge, which is that for the last decade, I have made the mistake of confusing my sense of purpose with my idealized sense of self. What do I mean by that? Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I do believe that many of us, myself included, have an idealized sense of self, a version of ourselves that we often daydream about being. This is the version of yourself that shows up in your imagination when you walk around town with your headphones in. This is the version of yourself that you embody in the shower when you relive an argument you had the day before and you come up with all those sick comebacks you wish you would have said. This is the version of you pretend to be when you act all cool and carefree on social media. In my case, my idealized sense of self has tended to be, in many ways, the virtual opposite of who I'm naturally inclined to be. As someone that naturally orients towards stable jobs and routines, cozy comfort zones, and leisurely walks around town, over time I noticed that these are not things that are considered particularly impressive to other people. In fact, these are mostly things that others would consider as doing nothing. And though I very much love my slow life with my local coffee shops and my leisurely walks, I shockingly never much enjoyed feeling invisible and unimportant. And so I started daydreaming about what it would be like to be someone that commands people's respect for a change. So whenever I'd feel particularly small or unimportant in my life, I would just throw my headphones in and daydream about being this ambitious go-getter woman who runs businesses and makes incredible art and effortlessly commands attention and respect. And over time, I very progressively and very unconsciously started making a life purpose out of becoming that version of myself. A highly visible, highly productive, and highly respected human being. Now, this all might sound like a low self-esteem issue, and to be honest, I think it partially was, but I also don't think that's the whole picture. Because when I first realized I'd been confusing my sense of purpose with my idealized sense of self, which by the way, I realized during one of my leisurely walks, so I guess those are useful after all. When I first realized I'd been making this mistake, the first thing I thought of was my boy, Carl Jung. Why, you ask? Well, let me tell you. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist and psychotherapist, and he talked a lot about this concept called individuation. According to Jung, though we are each born with natural personality traits that tend to lean towards one side of a certain spectrum, those of us who embark on a path of self-realization in life will likely at some point be forced, or compelled rather, to nurture underdeveloped parts of our personality in order to feel whole and balanced within ourselves. So for example, a naturally introverted person might at some point in their lives start to feel suffocated by their own little introvert bubble and may feel compelled to start putting themselves out there more and be seen by others, even if it's uncomfortable. It just feels like something they need to do for themselves. Likewise, someone who's more naturally extroverted, who has tended to prioritize external relationships throughout their lives, may at some point feel compelled to develop a relationship with themselves, to understand themselves better, exercising their capacity for self-reflection and introspection. So returning back to my personal example, considering the fact that I'm more naturally of an introverted feeler and that my idealized sense of self is the image of an extroverted doer, you could say that according to Jung, it is part of my life purpose to move towards being that version of myself. It's quite likely that my life purpose, whatever it may be, does exist beyond the confines of my leisurely walks and my local coffee shops. It's probable that my life purpose does involve me creating some tangible work that is visible in some way. So in that way, it might be a part of my life purpose to take just a few steps towards becoming the idealistic version I have of myself. But there's a big caveat to this, which is that the immense pressure I've been putting on myself to fully become my idealized sense of self in order to feel like I fulfilled my life purpose is simply wrong. Desperately trying to escape my introverted, introspective, feeling type personality in order to become more of an extroverted, logical, and highly productive type of person would be a waste, because there's so much to offer from being an intuitive person that understands human emotion. Then again, having all of that understanding with no extroverted ability to create something out of it and communicate it to others is debatably also a waste. Ultimately, what I've realized through my contemplations on this subject is that I don't need to kill my idealized sense of self, but I also don't need to become her completely. I can just use her as what she is. A mental archetype that I can draw inspiration from whenever I need to learn how to step out of my introvert bubble and communicate something of value to others. Nothing more. So after establishing that I didn't need to achieve anything grandiose, nor did I need to become the idealized version of myself in order to fulfill my life purpose, a third realization emerged that I think is perhaps the most important one. You cannot lose the game of life. And I'm going to attempt to prove this to you by addressing both the atheistic and the spiritual perspective. So if you consider yourself an atheist, I assume that means you believe that life is essentially completely random. Everything that happens on Earth and in life is cause and effect. Nothing is premeditated, nothing is planned, there's no such thing as fate nor destiny. Life emerged on Earth because the conditions happened to be right, and you happened to be born because your parents happened to meet when they did and they happened to conceive you when they did, but you don't believe you were inherently meant to be born. So if this is your belief that life is inherently random and that nothing is premeditated, then there really is no such thing as a life purpose you came here specifically to fulfill, because that would imply there's a place from whence you came before you were born where you and some other force would have decided on a plan for your life, which seems fundamentally incompatible with atheism. That said, you might very much still feel a pressure to assign a purpose to your life that would make use of your natural skills and talents in a way to build a better world for future generations. In that context, maybe you do then start to fear and question whether you're doing enough with your life, whether you're having enough of an impact. So if this is you, let me introduce you to a concept I call the human wave. The idea behind the human wave is to illustrate that every new generation that comes into the world builds momentum that eventually creates a wave of change for society on all levels. It starts out as a bunch of individuals having similar thoughts but keeping them to themselves. Eventually, those individuals start talking to each other, and when they realize they're not alone in having these thoughts, they seek out others and start to form groups. As the momentum of the wave builds, the wave starts to narrow down to a point. And that's because this section of the human wave represents the small percentage of human beings in a collective society that have the thick skin, the resilience, and the leadership ability to bring this change home into the world in a real and tangible way. These are the people that are willing to go out there, share their ideas, have the public debates, even if it means being resented by a large group of people who might disagree. These are the people that are willing to do what it takes to change the law if it needs to be changed. These are the people that are willing to go out there and create new opportunities for themselves, even if it means being judged by people who aren't used to seeing that. I say this is a small percentage of people because every change we see in the world is met with resistance, and the people who are pioneering these changes in a public way, not only do they have to stand firm in the face of at times relentless judgment and resistance, but unless they want to create new problems for the world, they also have to have the self-awareness it takes to realize that this resistance deep down is actually not a personal attack and is in fact a very healthy and necessary part of the process of collective change. Now that might be a bit of a controversial thing to say, but I sincerely believe it because I think collectively we know that not everything that is new is inherently good. So whenever we're faced with something that promises to change the way things are done, we almost always have to have this period of evaluation where we collectively suss out whether or not this change will be a net positive for society. When we evaluate the legitimacy of something, yes, we have to be open-minded, but we also have to put it through a thorough line of questioning. We have to probe into it, to investigate it. We have to essentially stress test it and see if this new change is based in strong enough logic and morality to withstand our line of questioning. Of course, I'm not saying we never make errors in judgment. History will show that we very often make errors in judgment in this realm. But I'm only saying all of this to point out the fact that when you are at the tip of a human wave, you are personally representing a movement, and therefore you are personally going to have to be strong enough to face this line of questioning. You know, being a pioneer of any sort of movement seems to me to be an enormous burden where oftentimes what's on the line is your pride and your reputation. And most people don't want to be in that position. Most people are not meant to be in that position. And that's why the tip of the wave represents a select few. I find this important to mention because I feel like we often make the mistake of assuming that what is more visible is inherently more valuable, and therefore the people at the tip of the human wave are inherently more valuable than the people at the root of the human wave. But I think this is a misunderstanding, because the truth is the external change makers at the tip of the wave and the internal contemplators at the root of the wave depend on each other to make a wave, so to speak. The people at the tip of the wave only derive their sense of purpose because of the momentum built up by everyone else prior. Without this collective momentum backing them up, these pioneers would just be droplets of water that no one pays attention to and that make absolutely no impact. What I'm ultimately trying to get to with this point is that by virtue of being born, observing the world, having feelings, having thoughts, having conversations with other people, you are inherently contributing to the momentum of your generational wave. And therefore, just by living a perfectly ordinary life, you are fulfilling an important purpose. You are contributing to something bigger than yourself. The beautiful thing about the human wave is that no matter where you are in the human wave, not only are you fulfilling an inherent purpose, but you're also giving purpose to everyone else around you. You might find over the course of your life that you become so captured by a certain cause that you very naturally start to move towards the tip of the wave as one of the pioneers of that movement. But I sincerely believe that this cannot be forced and that the currents of life will bring you there naturally if you have what it takes. What's important to remember, I think, is that the tip of the wave is not meant to be for everyone, and you do not have to end up there for your life to have had great value and purpose. So now that we've explored the atheistic perspective, let's move on to the spiritual one. If you consider yourself a spiritual person, then perhaps you believe that you chose to come to Earth as the person you are today, and you have a specific purpose you came here to fulfill, only you're not quite sure what that purpose is, and you feel like you're running out of time to figure it out and fulfill it. If this is you, my instinct is to say that you're probably a bit of a spiritual overachiever, and all of this questioning you're doing around your sense of purpose might be an unnecessarily stressful distraction, blinding you from the fact that you're already doing what you came here to do. If you are this terrified of failing to meet your life purpose, that indicates you have a strong willingness and motivation to fulfill your life's mission. And if you believe that there's more to this universe than what you can see, wouldn't you also believe that the forces at play would give you everything you need in life in order to fulfill your life's purpose? I'm not saying it's supposed to be easy, but it also makes no sense for this greater force to make it impossibly hard for you to do what it wants you to do. So I would say that if you find yourself really struggling with your sense of purpose as a spiritually minded person, it might be that your sense of purpose is much simpler than you think. The human wave metaphor I just gave the atheist might also be very relevant here for you. It might be that just living, observing, thinking, feeling, and conversing with others is all you need to do to contribute to the momentum of your generational wave and bring home all the changes society needs at this time. And this might be a little bit challenging to reckon with because we might have hoped that our life purpose would be this super glamorous and highly visible thing, when in fact it might be something that's meant to be more simple and unseen. But what I have found in my personal experience from having done this myself is that deriving a sense of purpose from your ego's yearnings is usually quite destructive. If not destructive to the outside world, then certainly destructive to your own sense of inner peace. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier in the video when I said I had to dismantle the idea that I needed to achieve something exceptional in order to feel like I achieved my life purpose. That belief has been very suffocating for me, has absolutely gotten in the way of me feeling at peace with myself, and that's partially why I've felt forced to learn how to let go of it. The other thing I would suggest that I'm starting to contemplate these days is that perhaps we're not meant to know what our life purpose is ahead of time. Perhaps it's something we're only meant to understand in hindsight. So instead of your life purpose being this finish line that you can see laid out in front of you and that you know exactly where you're supposed to go and you can orient your entire life towards making sure you cross that specific finish line, it might be that your sense of purpose is actually something that emerges out of you piece by piece, progressively throughout your life with every decision that you make, and that only really makes sense to you when you look back on your life and you see the full picture. So more and more, for me personally, fulfilling my life purpose has become more a question of how can I stay as true to myself in every decision that I make without getting too carried away by my ego's yearnings and impulses, and trusting that when I get to the end of the line, I'll look back on my life and I'll think to myself, oh, that's what I came here to do. So really the conclusion I'm trying to get to with this video is Stop trying to find your life purpose and start trying to live with as much self-awareness and presence as you can. Because either life on Earth is completely random and there's nothing more to it, in which case there's no such thing as a life purpose and you can essentially take yourself off the hook, or there are greater forces at play and you did come here to fulfill a specific kind of purpose, but you're not meant to know what it is ahead of time, in which case all of this pressure you're putting on yourself to find your life purpose is unnecessarily stressful. In either case, one thing is for sure, that by merely living an ordinary life, you are thinking, observing, and conversing with other people, and in so doing, you are contributing to the momentum of the generational wave you were born into, a wave that always ultimately comes crashing down, bringing with it impactful changes to the world. So no matter what your faith is, the ultimate message I have for you today is this: just living is enough.